everybody, so I just wanted to show you the newest corset I made. I actually have been nearly finished this for a couple of weeks, but I had to wait for another order of gold grommets to come in so that it would actually match the corset. But I just wanted to show it off to you. So here is the front, the side, the back, and the other side. So this corset, as I was working on it, I didn't know if it was going to end up being really tacky or really fabulous, and I think it's kind of both, or somewhere in between. It's actually made out of two vintage fabrics. The red fabric is actually this, it was a decorative kind of pillow before, and it was like just like a large body pillow almost, and I washed it and took the parts that were still good because it has very tiny gathers in it, almost like rosettes. I'm cinched in relatively tight, but I look a lot bigger in the corset because the fabric is kind of puffy. I'll show you a close-up of it in a couple minutes. And then the gold here is this lovely gold satin, and the inside is lined completely in the satin, and you can see that I also put in decorative like triangles or wedges in the back there. Okay, so here is the corset close up and lying flat. I put an angled light on it so that you can see the texture of the fabric and how like gathered and puckered it is. It's 3 layers total. So the fashion fabric is this puffy red material. I traced the outline of the panels onto the red material, and then I used a very tight stitch around the edges of the panel so that the gathers won't pull out once I cut the fabric. I then flatlined this red material to the coutil, which is the second layer, so that the red puffy fabric wouldn't stretch or change its shape in any way. And I did this one panel at a time, just cutting the red fabric out and then flatlining it to the coutil so that if I left it a day or something, then if my dog got into it or something, then it wouldn't pull out or change its shape. And then the last layer is this beautiful gold satin. It's a floating liner, and it actually feels really, really nice against the skin. It looks really wrinkly in this lighting, but rest assured it's quite smooth. So looking at the right half of the corset here, in terms of the construction, all the seams of the panels were faux flat fell. So it was kind of like a flat felled seam, except it wasn't folded over. What I did was I stitched the panels together, and then I ironed the seam allowances to one side, trimmed down that seam allowance, and then top stitched. So the external boning channels here, they're made with a store-bought bone casing. It's a thin, densely woven tube. Here is an example of it. And let me just stick a pencil in here so that you actually do see that it is indeed a tube, and it has very tiny little seam allowances on each side of it. So you can actually stitch that down about 1/16 of an inch next to the edge. So what I ended up doing was basting these gold satin strips to the tiny seam allowances on either side of these boning casings. And then I folded the edge of the satin underneath, and then I sewed this whole thing to the outside of the corset like that. I don't know if you can see on this camera, but I'm a little bit disappointed in how the boning channels ended up looking on this corset. I spent quite a bit of time just slowly going over these channels, but they still look kind of bumpy and wobbly due to all the puffiness and the gathers of the red fabric of the corset. Because I was sewing over that, then the boning channels, even though I was going slowly and trying to go as straight as possible, it still kind of ended up looking a little bumpy. And just giving a little close-up here to the inside, pardon the bad lighting, but I hand-stitched the inside of the binding here. What I did on the outside was I machine-stitched that to make it all straight, and then to make sure that it was very tidy on the inside and that no other seams showed up on the outside, I just slip-stitched that. So I will show you how to do that in a future tutorial. And there is a waist tape in this corset. If I pull this taut here, you can see the very faint outline of it, and it's stitched down to the coutil after I put all the panels together, and then when I went over those panels with the external boning channels, it reinforced that waist tape in there again. In terms of the boning of this corset, this is probably the lightest bone corset I've ever made. It only has 12 bones in it. After reviewing so many off-the-rack corsets with their minimal boning, I wanted to see what was the bare minimum I could get away with. So since the puffiness of this fashion fabric, it doesn't really allow any wrinkling to show up. And because this is not a training corset, really the bones in here are to hold the vertical tension and prevent the corset from rolling up more than anything else. However, I think 12 bones are the minimum number that can create a comfortable corset. I think any less than that, and you'll probably get wrinkling and possibly some pressure points. So there are 8 1/4-inch wide spiral steel bones on the sides here. See 1, 2, 3, 4 in the boning channels and 4 on the other side as well. That makes 8. And on the back here, on either side of the grommets, there are another 2 1/2-inch wide steel flats, and of course another 2 on the other side as well. If I were using a standard busk, a standard flexible busk that's 1/2 inch wide on each side, I probably would have added another set of flats on either side of the busk. But because I used a 1 inch wide on each side, pretty heavy busk here, then I found that this was quite sturdy. It was sturdy enough, so I didn't really need to add flats on either side of it. And by the way, the busk that I used here, it is 15 inches long, so it is the longest busk that I've ever used, which is why I made the front very flat. And I found that this does not curve around the bust area very well, but for the purpose of this corset and the style that I made it, I kind of like the effect that it gave. It didn't show too much cleavage or anything, but it was still comfortable. It gave me enough room, so I kind of like how it turned out. So along the back here, you can see that there are 26 gold-colored 2-part size 0 grommets. I do have size 00 grommets in gold, but I thought this corset would have been more flattering with the larger grommets. The smaller ones, I probably would have had to put at least 34 or so grommets in the back, and that would have been more complicated to tie, and I found that I don't really like seeing so many grommets in the back. I like to have the back looking as simple as possible while still holding enough tension and support that you can tie it properly. However, when I do make corsets for other people, my friends, my family, etc., I do give them the option of which size grommets they want to use, either the 0 or the 00. I put both of them the same way. You know, I use an awl. I put fray check around the hole before I put the grommet in, and then I use 2-part grommets and squeeze them. So really, it's up to the individual person which size grommet they want to use, because both of them are quite strong. For the laces, I used 8 meters of this 550 paracord. It's extremely strong, and I find that it's very easy to lace up with it because it's quite slippery. I find that I can manipulate the laces within the grommets quite easily. If I wanted to make it a little bit more fancy, I probably would have used a double-faced satin in bright red or gold or something like that. But for my purposes, this is fine. It works quite well. And as you can see here in the back, I did not put any modesty panel in here because, as you could see as I was modeling it earlier, I could pretty much close it all the way in the back, so I found that I didn't really need a modesty panel, and it's quite comfortable without one, I've found. However, if somebody else were to receive this corset, then I would certainly add a matching gold modesty panel in the same satin, and I would stiffen it either with the plastic canvas or steel boned in some way. And I would also make it a floating panel floating in the middle of the laces like I usually do it. And that's pretty much it for this case study. So I hope you enjoyed it. If you have any questions about how I constructed this, please let me know in the comments below, and I will see you in the next video. Bye.